It has an amazing sound, from sounds that you can hardly hear to sounds that you think, oh, wow. It's very, very thrilling to play it, particularly when I know that others are enjoying it.
The Hazel Wright Organ, just called Hazel by her admirers. She is the world's 5th largest pipe organ, with more than 17,000 pipes, more than 300 stops, and nearly 300 ranks. She takes up all 4 corners of Christ Cathedral, enveloping everything with a richness of sound and glory, power and subtlety. This is the story of the world's most widely heard pipe organ, from her origins to her decline and return to glory once again. Talented and dedicated people made her a reality, kept her going, and helped her sing again. This is the saga of how and why they did it.
Nobody had ever tried putting an organ in a building made of glass.
This is built to last for centuries.
The pipe organ serves to lift people's hearts up to give praise to God.
Well, for an organist, it's a dream come true.
The bishop was very supportive, and so we were able to get this done. Otherwise, it couldn't have been done.
Oh, there was never any question about having a large organ in this facility. It was just so much of the Bob and Arvella fabric.
St. Augustine once said, music is a fair and glorious gift of God. This organ was well known around the world, so we really should restore it and help her sing again to the glory of God.
The story of how a Garden Grove church got one of the world's biggest pipe organs started with having one of the smallest. In 1955, the Reverend Robert Harold Schuller and his wife Arvella arrived in Orange County from the Midwest with $500 in seed money, no congregation, and no permanent worship space. Ordained by the Reformed Church of America, Reverend Schuller had been called to found a new church in what was then unincorporated Garden Grove, just down the street from a brand new Disneyland in rural Orange County. The story of what happened next for the Schullers would become the stuff of legend. They started their ministry by preaching from a rented drive-in movie theater, expanding from those humble origins in the decades after to teach the Word of God from within a glass edifice they called the Crystal Cathedral. But perhaps lesser known in that saga is the central role that music, organ music in particular, played in that growth right from the very beginning. In fact, a great deal of the Schullers' initial $500 seed money from 1955 actually went toward buying a tiny 2-manual Conn electric organ and a trailer to move it.
I think that story really foreshadows how successful the music ministry was going to be in the decades that followed. It's incredible to think about that being a priority for a brand new ministry is getting something to lead a music ministry, getting music to be a central focus right from the beginning, right from the earliest date.
Dr. David Crean is the author of The Hazel Wright Organ, the first book dedicated to telling the complete story of the remarkable instrument. Dr. Crean, an organist himself, conducted the research and wrote the book, not from sunny Orange County, but from the Midwest, Dayton, Ohio. There he serves as music director for St. George's Episcopal Church and is a host on WDPR, a local classical radio station. In the Buckeye State, Crean chronicled the saga of how the Schullers' first electronic Conn, which got rain-soaked and rusted after its 5 years of use, got upgraded by larger, more elaborate instruments over the years. A milestone of that happened in 1962, when Reverend Schuller was able to finally open a permanent worship space for his Garden Grove Community Church in the building today known as the Arboretum. His church, of course, included having a pipe organ.
The wonderful thing about that was that the ministry was only like 6 years old when they opened that Arboretum. And in most congregations, the pipe organ is a major investment and it comes many, many years later. But it was so important to Bob Arvela that they opened up with a pipe organ.
Richard Unfried served as the Schuller's principal organist from 1962 to 1984. He got the job after they had heard about him working a summer organ camp. Though as a youngster, his earliest attempts at success on the organ seemed unlikely.
Because I have big feet and clumsy shoes, I couldn't hit less than 4 pedal keys at once, and so I was the least likely to succeed.
6 decades later, Unfried still plays the organ, including one inside his La Mirada home, which he had specially modified to accommodate it. During his days with the Schuller's ministry, Unfried played on modest equipment, but they were always thinking larger to meet the needs of an ever-growing congregation. By 1970, the Schullers had expanded their campus with the Tower of Hope and began airing their world-famous Hour of Power broadcasts, becoming part of the first wave of American televangelists. Their music program needed to be expanded accordingly. Fortunately for them, an Italian organ building company called Fratelli Ruffati, founded in 1940 by 3 brothers, was looking to break into the American market.
I was lobbying for a larger, finer organ, even in the 70s. And so we signed a contract in 1972 with Ruffati for a 5-manual, 116-rank organ.
The Schullers commissioned Fratelli Ruffati to build a new organ for their Garden Grove Community Church. During the process, they visited the Ruffati factory, located in Padua, Italy, outside Venice. By 1977, the project was done, the new Ruffati organ installed and voiced in the Garden Grove Church. But by that point, 5 years had passed since the Schullers originally commissioned it, and the ministry was already moving onward and getting even larger. They were envisioning what would become a crowning achievement.
At this time, we knew that the sanctuary had to expand, but they were looking at ways of expanding the arboretum, perhaps building out into the courtyard, whatnot. And so the pipe organ, this new large pipe organ, was well along in its gestation period when the concept of a Crystal Cathedral was finally introduced.
The Crystal Cathedral, designed by Philip Johnson and John Burgee, and touted as the world's largest glass building when it opened in 1980, had 10,000 panes of glass. It would need a pipe organ powerful enough to fill it with sound.
Oh, there was never any question about having a large organ in this facility. It was just so much of the Bob and Arvela fabric.
Luckily for the Schullers, a 1962 Aeolian Skinner organ from Philharmonic Hall at Lincoln Center in New York City was for sale. The decision was made, guided by the vision and direction of famed organist Virgil Fox, to create a new organ that combined the Arboretum's 1977 Fratelli Ruffati with Philharmonic Hall's Aeolian Skinner. Like most everything to come for Hazel, the job would not be easy.
You know, the task of combining 2 very large instruments, I mean, you're talking about 2 instruments, both over 100 ranks, built by different builders in different countries, actually, over a decade apart. Combining that into a single cohesive instrument still would be quite an undertaking. And, in the late 70s was really, really a tall order.
To complete this combined organ for the Crystal Cathedral, the Schullers, already well known for their Hour of Power broadcast, needed major funding. At this crucial juncture is when, as fate would have it, the Wright benefactor, Hazel C. Wright, a widower philanthropist from Chicago, entered the picture.
The story goes that Hazel Wright just kind of came out of nowhere with this donation. She wasn't a musician. She really didn't even have that much of a connection to the music program. She was an Hour of Power viewer.
Mrs. Wright was looking to make a donation. She called the Crystal Cathedral unsolicited, saying she wanted to make a generous gift. $50,000 toward a garden was mentioned. She declined. She wanted to go bigger, much bigger. They settled on $1 million toward the completion of the newly combined pipe organ.
She said, that's the one. That's what I want to donate. So she did. She donated the entire $1 million to get the organ put together initially, and then even more money after that to endow a fund for its maintenance.
Unfried only met Hazel Wright once. As he tells it, Reverend Schuller had always been looking for a $1 million donor. He knew it would be hard securing the first one, but once that could be accomplished, others would fall in line. That came to pass in making the dream of the Hazel Wright organ a reality.
I was so anxious to find out why someone would be the very first donor to give $1 million for one pipe organ. I asked her that. I said, I'm really anxious to know what joy you got in giving this gift. And she said, well, I'll tell you. And she said, Dr. Schuller had been a blessing to me and my husband while he was alive. And she said, well, it fits my budget, I'll go for it. So she did it because she could afford it.
According to promotional materials at the time, Mrs. Wright said of her donation, "Because my husband and I were not blessed with children, I found much satisfaction, fulfillment, and joy in devoting my time to various charities that I supported, both in time and money." Reverend Schuller, funding now secured, could complete the pipe organ project. He always acknowledged his major donor, but Mrs. Wright, despite the high-profile nature of the instrument, was never about receiving any kind of special recognition.
She was, by all accounts, very kind of retiring and averse to the limelight. You know, there's some really beautiful photos of her with the Schullers at the dedication ceremony accepting flowers and things, but really she never wanted to be the center of attention. She wanted the organ to be the center of attention, and the Schullers, especially Robert Schuller, was always very purposeful about referring to it as the Hazel Wright organ, not just our organ or the organ, but the Hazel Wright organ. And it's great that that's continued into Christ Cathedral, even though it's a different organization, completely no connection to the actual woman. It's really wonderful that they've continued to refer to it as the Hazel Wright organ.
Hazel C. Wright would make only a few trips to hear her organ after the instrument's completion in 1982. She died only 2 years after, in 1984, at the age of 79. Frederick Swan remembers those rare times when the benefactor was in the building.
I would always play her favorite hymns or do something, and we would always recognize her when she was here.
In 1982, thanks to the secured funding from Mrs. Hazel C. Wright, the Crystal Cathedral, then only 2 years old, could install its magnificent pipe organ. Hazel would replace a Rogers electronic organ used when the cathedral opened. But having the instrument within this giant edifice made of glass was a brilliant idea in concept, but would prove to be difficult in execution right from the very beginning.
Nobody had ever tried putting an organ in a building made of glass. It was an unprecedented installation. Nobody really knew how it was going to go. Nobody knew how it was going to sound.
Piero Ruffati is the second generation of the Ruffati family involved in their Italian organ building company, Fratelli Ruffati. His father, Antonio Ruffati, was one of the 3 brothers who founded the business in 1940.
I'm a partner with my brother of the Ruffati Organ Company, which is based in Italy, in Padua, Italy, northeast of Italy near Venice. Well, this is being a family business. I was brought in to help my father with my brother on the business. In 1968, my brother and myself became partners with the company when my father bought the company from his brothers. And we have been working with the company since then.
Alongside Crystal Cathedral architect Philip Johnson, Ruffati helped design the Hazel Wright organ for the building. The end result created a surround sound effect, with much of the organ taking up the northern end of the building, and her primary console prominently displayed. Another section was installed on the south balcony. The east and west balconies held the chamades. However, magnificent as Hazel turned out to be, being in the Crystal Cathedral presented its own unique set of circumstances.
Well, the challenges in this building are the fact that the organ is on many levels, and because that was the only way going up into heights was the only way to accommodate all those over 16,000 pipes which the organ has. So in order to reach all the levels is kind of challenging. It is a challenging as far as the tuning of the organ is concerned as well, because the temperature changes from level to level.
The Crystal Cathedral team learned quickly that the temperature changes from the top of the organ to the bottom made keeping it in tune a difficult task. Changing weather, whether cold and cloudy to hot and sunny, affected the tuning.
Few occasions in the history of organ building have offered the challenges that installation offered.
Brian Sawyers has spent more time with the Hazel Wright organ than most, having been involved in both her installation and restoration. He started studying classical piano at age 6 and became fascinated with the pipe organ when he was 9. By 1977, he found himself working with Richard Unfried on the Arboretum's original Rufati organ that would become part of Hazel. He later joined in the original installation project of the Hazel Wright organ in the early 1980s.
I found it so fascinating that I was ditching school to come in and work with them on the installation on some days. I just took to it and learned as much as I could, and I had been reading books and everything else, and that was fascinating, but hands-on was the way to really learn.
During the installation process, Sawyers fondly remembers the moment when he got to see Hazel's massive 5-manual console, built by Fratelli Rufati, for the first time. It was in a shipping container in the parking lot.
We were already deep into the process of getting everything put in all throughout the building. And we went out to, finally, customs had come and cut the seal on the trailer and everything, so we knew that's where the rest of our parts were, and we knew the console was there. So we go out into this container, which wasn't very deep, and walked in, and there was a blanket, packing blankets covering this thing, and we just lifted the packing blankets off. And this is what the first thing you saw, and like I said, that was at the time was the largest drawn-up console in the world. And we weren't expecting, we knew it was going to be big, we'd seen some photos, but when you see it up close, it's like somebody just comes up and pah, right in the gut. Oh my God, that's huge. And then after spending so many years with it, it's like, that's not so big.
Sawyers joined the ministry, doing maintenance full-time on Hazel. He kept her going through good weather and bad, for the regular TV broadcasts, weddings, funerals, Christmas and Easter productions, whatever was needed.
It was constant work, because the room, you put a 6-story organ in a greenhouse, and it's going to be a full-time job to keep it in tune. And we discovered that, and through that we kind of became experts at how to track and keep an organ going as much as possible, as much as you can in a room like this. And at that time there was no climate control.
The Hazel Wright organ had her dedication in May 1982, with 223 of the planned 281 ranks available. Pierre Cochereau, the organist of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, performed, as did a 100-piece orchestra and choir of more than 1,000. Cochereau called Hazel a great instrument and jokingly asked Reverend Schuller about getting one for Notre Dame. But he added, "It takes hours and hours and hours for an organist to get used to such a monster." Frederick Swan came to the Crystal Cathedral in 1982 from the Riverside Church in New York City. He would serve as organist and music director through 1998, helping Hazel become the most widely heard pipe organ in the world through television broadcasts and other recordings.
I started playing the organ very young, when I was 10 years old, playing for church when I was 10 years old. I was a very lucky child. I never had to decide what I was going to do when I grew up, because I loved the organ so much. I just kept at it. I played for church for 80 years, and I had a concert career for more than 70 years.
In the years after Hazel's installation and dedication, Swan and others would continue tinkering with the instrument, revoicing, adding or replacing pipes. Far from being a monolithic thing, she was in a constant state of flux. Hazel also had a reportedly fickle nature, working well with some players and not others.
When you put two organs together like that, you end up with an awfully big organ. You have 2 and 3 of some things that you don't need, and so we made some changes in it as the years went by. Particularly in a very, very large instrument like this, with the enormous console, so many things to push and stops to pull. You have to be very careful. It would be so easy to hit one accidentally or do something wrong. So it's a matter of full concentration all the time.
For years, the Hazel Wright Organ and her Crystal Cathedral home enjoyed tremendous success. A who's who of the organ world played on her. Recordings were done. Future generations were inspired. The occasional tiger stopped by. Importantly, Hazel supported Reverend Schuller's ministry from her central spot in the cathedral.
It's funny, year after year, as I've gotten older, I hear from people who have heard me play it at one time or another and what a difference it made in their life. Some people, it caused them to become organists, or some people had felt that their religious experience was changed. And of course, you never think that you're doing any of that when you're doing it. You just do it.
By 2010, after more than 5 decades of growing from its humble beginnings to a world-famous megachurch made of glass with a reach to millions the world over, the Crystal Cathedral was in crisis. Succession plans for Reverend Schuller were problematic. Financial insecurities hurt the ministry, as did a dwindling and aging broadcast audience. All eventually led to a bankruptcy filing and ensuing bidding war for the future of the cathedral and its sprawling campus. Unfortunately, much like everything else around her, the Hazel Wright Organ had seen better days. Sections were unpredictable, in need of repair, or silent. Structural problems in the Crystal Cathedral, such as a leaking roof and the continual temperature swings that always made tuning Hazel a problem, contributed to the organ being in a state of disrepair.
Certain aspects, even beyond the glass walls and ceiling, made it difficult. You had the 90-foot doors that were constantly open, letting in birds and bees and all manner of other of God's critters. And they found their way into the organ, many of them. When they took the organ apart, there were lots of dead birds, some of whom had met kind of a gruesome end, unfortunately. There were all sorts of obstacles to keeping this organ playing.
As the Crystal Cathedral was looking for a buyer, the Diocese of Orange was looking to construct a new, much larger cathedral to replace Holy Family in the city of Orange. Originally, the Catholic Church had envisioned building a new cathedral on a property in Santa Ana. But once Reverend Schuller's campus became an option, the focus shifted into acquiring and then transforming the sprawling Garden Grove property into a major West Coast center of Catholic worship. By 2012, the Diocese of Orange completed its purchase of the Crystal Cathedral, ensuring that it would remain a place of Christian worship. In remarks made in 2012, after the sale was complete, Reverend Schuller addressed the Roman Catholic leadership, calling them the Mother Church. He said he was grateful for the Church's appreciation and stewardship of art and architecture.
So it was my plan to hopefully see to it that the title and the ownership of my life's work in land and buildings would be in the control of the Roman Catholic Church. So that's why I'm so honored to see you today, to tell you that, and to thank you for taking it. Well, you didn't just take it, you paid for it. I trust it to you. It's yours. This could be a global place for dynamic energy to be generated. And that's what the church needs today and tomorrow. Dynamic, creative energy. If to be found anywhere, it's got to be in you. You are the church. I know that, respect that, honor that. Thank you for taking charge of a physical facility that can be used for the glory of God and to honor the name of our Lord and the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. I love him. I know you do too. And thank you for giving me these few moments.
For the Diocese of Orange, the acquisition of the Crystal Cathedral property in 2012 happened concurrently with a change in leadership. Bishop Todd Brown, who had overseen the Crystal Cathedral purchase, resigned from his position upon reaching the mandatory retirement age of 75. Bishop Kevin Vann of the Diocese of Fort Worth was named the new bishop of the Diocese of Orange. In Bishop Vann, the Hazel Wright Organ soon found her champion, a person who prioritized her when many others may have not. Bishop Vann grew up in Springfield, Illinois, where he developed an early interest in music.
My grandmother thought I should take piano lessons. My mother didn't think I would stick with it, so my grandparents paid for my first year of lessons with my aunt, who was a music teacher, a Dominican sister, so I took lessons from her for about a year, and then I went over then to the grade school where I was at my home parish.
Bishop Vann continued with recitals and playing baritone in his high school band. Eventually, with his piano background, he added playing pipe organ to his skill set.
I started playing the organ at the cathedral in Springfield on Saturday evening when they first started Saturday evening Mass.
Bishop Vann came to his new diocese in sunny Orange County, not knowing the whole story, but he soon learned and made priorities. A tour with Father Christopher Smith, a fellow organist, Orange County native, and rector of the cathedral, helped familiarize him with what was happening here.
I didn't know anything, really, about the campus of the diocese or anything. You just don't, you just go. So once I got here, I found out about the history of the Hazel Wright Organ. So pretty quickly on, I knew that the Hazel Wright Organ was part of the patrimony of this. And having been a musician myself and knowing organ and piano, I knew this was important. And also I knew that out there was kind of a sense that Catholics would not take care of it. That's, what the caricature was. So, I got involved pretty quickly and said, no, we needed to restore this instrument.
Bishop Vann also made it a priority that the restoration work be done where much of the organ began, Padua, Italy, at the Fratelli Ruffati workshop.
Some folks wanted to do it here at home, and I said no, because if you go to your doctor who takes care of you, who's the best. So we go back to the people who built it, who know the instrument intimately, and let's have them rebuild it. To neglect her or not repair her would not be a good thing. And there is a prejudice out there that Catholics don't and organs don't go together, but that's not true at all. But I wanted to show that yes, we were going to rebuild her and help her sing again to the glory of God.
David Crean notes that the organ refurbishment was a massive feat. Pipe organs of that size don't normally have a full restoration done at once.
A lot of churches would have just scrapped it. Said this instrument is huge, it's unwieldy, it's going to be enormously expensive to refurbish it. We're just going to scrap it and get something smaller or get something not pipe. It was a serious undertaking. Certainly to be commended that the diocese was immediately on board with it. And Father Christopher's told me that it didn't really take all that much effort to raise the money for it, that people have such a connection to this organ, not just in Orange County, but around the world, that pretty much all they had to do was ask, and the money came for the restoration.
In 2013, the diocese held a concert to raise money for Hazel's $3 million restoration. It featured Hector Oliveira.
Music is a fair and glorious gift of God. And indeed, brothers and sisters, is it not? Does not music open our hearts to the presence of God? Does not music bring us all together for many, many reasons? And lift us up, strengthen us, and help us to see how God works in our lives. Music is a great and glorious gift of God. And you know, with that gift of God comes a great responsibility for all of us. A great responsibility to continue the heritage of faith that was here and the heritage of music in this wonderful instrument. So therefore, brothers and sisters, I'm asking you to reflect this evening, how can you help us?
It is my desire for you to hear as much as you can out of this instrument. Really, the instrument is not feeling very well. It needs to go to the hospital. And is going to rejuvenate and come back in a long while from now, not too long, and then it's going to be full of force.
In 2014, the Hazel Wright organ was carefully dismantled and shipped piece by piece to the Fratelli Rifati Company for a complete refurbishment. 2 years later, the organ returned to Orange County, although the Crystal Cathedral, since renamed Christ Cathedral under the diocese's new ownership and its transformation into a Catholic worship space, was not yet ready for Hazel. She was stored in an Irvine warehouse until 2019, when she was reinstalled inside the newly renovated Christ Cathedral. She had one big noticeable difference. Her cases were painted white from their original brown to match the new Christ Cathedral aesthetic. Gabriel Ferrucci has long been a faithful supporter of the Diocese of Orange. A native Italian with years of business experience, he served as the perfect bridge between his diocese and Fratelli Rifati. While many others were involved in the music making, Ferrucci reviewed the ever-important behind-the-scenes paper trail and addressed any challenges associated with it.
I negotiated so many contracts for myself all my life, particularly overseas, because I was responsible for many years of businesses in different countries and try to understand different cultures, how you approach it. And so I developed the methodology, how to do it. We introduced clauses in there that were good for the diocese that they had never seen and they did not understand, that I had to explain in great details. We had to get insurance coverage that they had never provided before, but it was important for our diocese to have that coverage. The good thing that, number one, the bishop was very supportive, and so we were able to get this done, otherwise it couldn't have been done.
During the installation process, an ex-police officer came into the cathedral with a shotgun. Using a blank round, he fired the gun to test the reverberation in the building. It was important not to have too much reverberation, but to maintain a balance between sound clarity and warmth. On July 17, 2019, Christ Cathedral was formally dedicated. Unfortunately, for that ceremony, Hazel was not finished in time. The Cathedral Music Ministry used a digital organ on loan from the Pennsylvania-based Walker Technical Company. The process to bring Hazel back to life continued throughout 2019, and when it was first tested, everyone was in for a shock. Due to the physical changes made in the cathedral interior, the organ sounded as if it had been designed for another building. The new acoustics were excellent, but Hazel sounded too bold for her renovated space. This reality necessitated the revoicing of almost every one of the more than 16,000 pipes. To accomplish this, the Fratelli Rifati team worked tirelessly for months, working when the cathedral was closed so everything could be done in quiet. Thinking Hazel would be done in 2020, the Christ Cathedral Music Ministry planned a big celebration to mark her return that year. But like everything else, the COVID-19 pandemic halted plans.
We performed most of the work until COVID came in. And all of a sudden, our crew had to escape, go back to Italy in a hurry, in order not to be trapped in the United States because flights to Europe were canceled.
The Walker digital organ continued to be of service throughout 2020 and 2021 for live stream and in-person services. By the end of 2021, Fratelli Ruffati was able to return and continue the voicing process, a crucial step on the way to bringing the Hazel Wright organ back to life.
And now we're back, finally. There are no flight restrictions anymore. Well, that was quite a relief for us because we have been wondering for a long time when we could come back. Our task is to have the organ done and finish and, and see the final result of a lot of work that we did.
Though pipe organs have been used for hundreds of years, today's instruments rely on advanced digital technology, and Hazel is no exception. Helping in that upgrade for the organ's back-end components is Dwight Jones, president of Integrated Organ Technologies.
When an organist presses a key or performs some other operation, we make it happen in the chamber. Organs just can't fail. It's just not tolerated. And that's not to say it doesn't happen occasionally, but to make something as bulletproof as possible is a real challenge on an organ of this size.
Integrated Organ Technologies has been involved in Hazel's restoration since 2014. Though it may not look it from the outside, the organ now uses sophisticated fiber technology fit for the 21st century. It has various smart characteristics and diagnostic tools, with statistics constantly being generated.
And it's all designed just to support the sound that people were able to recreate 500 years ago.
By early 2022, a decade after the Diocese of Orange took over the Crystal Cathedral property and her Hazel Wright organ, the instrument was finally ready for its next chapter. The instrument was refurbished and reinstalled. She had been voiced and the back-end technology upgraded. The digital organ from the Walker Company was removed. Frederick Swan was brought in, and relying on his decades of experience in pipe organs and familiarity with Hazel, he examined the instrument, testing her range and limits. Then came February 7th, signing day. It marked the end of one era and the beginning of a new one. In front of the organ's main console, Bishop Kevin Vann, Cathedral Rector Father Christopher Smith, Frederick Swan, Cathedral Organist David Ball, Hazel's new curator, Kevin Cartwright, and Piero Ruffati signed a special agreement. In effect, Swan accepted the organ's restoration work by the Ruffati team, handing her off to Cartwright's company, Los Angeles-based Rosales Organ Builders, for continued maintenance. After the signing, Swan and Ball played for the small group of diocese leaders.
The organ is in much better shape now than it ever was. I will say that what the diocese has done to the interior of the cathedral is wonderful. Not only in the way it looks, but as far as the sound of the organ, just as the room is more intimate downstairs, the nave, the organ is more intimate, it's more focused sound.
Gabriel Ferrucci was also present on the signing day.
The organ has been completed. It sounds great. It looks beautiful. Everybody is happy. The papers are signed. After I heard the first play from David Ball, I said, now that I heard this, God, you can call me.
Like Bishop Vann, Father Christopher also plays the organ. He served as Christ Cathedral's first rector from 2012 to 2022. Through his tenure, he was able to see the Hazel project through its entirety. He first heard Hazel during the Crystal Cathedral era and was at the Hector Olivera concert in 2013. But that didn't prepare him for what she sounded like on signing day, after her restoration.
When I heard the Hazel Wright pipe organ played for the first time today, I literally got tears in my eyes. So I personally am so excited and so grateful that we were able to restore this wonderful instrument. When I hear a pipe organ, it's like my heart races because the sound is so beautiful and it's so different from any sound that we hear in the world. And I know that when the people hear this pipe organ, the same thing is going to happen. So the pipe organ serves to lift people's hearts up to give praise to God. In the documents of the church, the pipe organ really is the official instrument of Catholic liturgy. And one of the reasons for that is that pipe organs are a combination of every instrument you can think of. A pipe organ is like an orchestra in itself. And that's very beautiful because it's symbolic of the church, which is made up of all kinds of people from different places, from different backgrounds, with different voices and all kinds of things like that. And so the accompaniment of the sacred music by a pipe organ is extremely significant. When you have an instrument like the Hazel Wright pipe organ, it's enhanced even more. In Catholic worship, we say that music is integral to what we do. St. Augustine once said, when you sing, it's like playing twice. Well, I think when you sing and play the pipe organ, you're praying 3 times because you have the spoken word that's turned into the musical word, and then you have that accompanied by this beautiful music.
Later that evening, after the signing day, the Hazel Wright organ was played during the World Marriage Day Mass, which quietly became her public soft opening debut. A major milestone had been reached, but still, the work of fully bringing back Hazel wasn't done. It was then time for the organ's new curator to take over. Kevin Cartwright, president of Rosales Organ Builders in Los Angeles, and his team have been charged with the task of tuning the instrument and her ongoing maintenance.
While today is the close of a chapter for many involved, it's the opening of a chapter for myself and my firm. I became an organ technician, I can say at the fault of my mother. She was a parish organist, and I was enthused by the sound of the instrument, watching her play the organ. And I wanted to learn how to play, so I started to learn how to play, took lessons. I needed something to practice on, and at that time it was cheaper to buy a pipe organ than it was to buy an electronic one. So I bought a small pipe organ as a teenager. I raised funds working at a fast food restaurant. And I needed to learn how to work on it since it was my own, and I began apprenticing at age 15. And here 25 years later, I find myself in this position. With all organ projects, there are a number of bugs which must be worked out in the first year at least. So we're anticipating a fair quantity of mechanical repairs and a lot of tuning.
Between February and June, Cartwright and his team spent many hours individually tuning Hazel to meet the next project deadline for when Bishop Kevin Vann would bless the instrument in a formal ceremony.
So the tuning process involves 2 people. One of us must be in the organ, that's usually me, and then we need someone here at the console to push the keys. Next. Next. So these trumpets are unique in the organ because they're not mounted vertically. They're mounted horizontally. As you can see, the wind chest is on its side and the trumpets are facing directly out toward the listener. And when you need a fanfare or you need a trumpet effect, which is going to sound above full organ or above a full congregation of singing, this is where the organist goes to tell everyone what the melody is and make a statement. The satisfaction for us is seeing the audience and the inspiration the instrument creates once we have the instrument operating as best as it can possibly be.
By June 10th, with tuning happening until the last minute, Hazel was ready for her formal debut. Anticipation had been building for months. An Associated Press story, released soon after the February signing date, helped spread the news to the entire music-loving world that Hazel is back. A special Facebook group, the Hazel Wright Organ Society, kept up the conversation about Hazel's old days and her future. June 10th's blessing brought around 1,000 music lovers into the cathedral. Thousands more from around the country tuned in online to the event's live stream. Joseph Soleil-Cole, the Vatican's organist, even flew in from Rome for the occasion and gave a special performance. Bishop Van and Father Christopher also took turns playing Hazel during a special media preview earlier in the day. More media coverage followed the blessing, letting the community know Hazel is back.
The Hazel Wright Organ just underwent a $3 million restoration.
Tonight, the Hazel Wright Organ will be the centerpiece of a Catholic blessing, and it will be played by the papal organist. In Garden Grove, Vicki Vargas, NBC4 News.
Playing this organ is, well, for an organist, it's a dream come true. I like to sort of compare it when my students play. It's sort of like driving a Cadillac.
David Ball has been with the Christ Cathedral Music Ministry since 2016 and was named its director in 2020. The Juilliard-trained organist who studied with Paul Jacobs is among the lucky few ever who gets to play the Hazel Wright organ day after day.
I first started playing organ when I was 14, and that was in St. Louis, Missouri, actually at the Cathedral Basilica and at 118 rank Kilgan. So big organs are just in big, beautiful Catholic spaces are just a part of who I am.
Every time Ball plays at the console and conducts the choir, he feels like he's following in the footsteps of the people before him. Every time he pulls a stop, he can imagine Virgil Fox designing it, or maybe Frederick Swan reaching for a knob during an hour of power service.
For me, the Hazel Wright organ is special because not only is it the visceral quality, the immediacy of the sound, it's a thrill to play, not only because of that tonal quality that the Ruffatis and Alien Skinner put into this beautiful instrument, but the history. In the US, this organ has been played by so many amazing, legendary players. Close to my heart, you know, I'm a big Virgil Fox fan. He designed this organ. Fred Swan played it for many years. And on the Hour of Power, every organist sat on that bench and made music, from Madame Duraflay all the way up to Paul Jacobs and Catherine Crozier. Just amazing players, one after the other. Every organist stops by this cathedral to play this pipe organ. And so to play it connects me with that history in a really special way.
Thanks to the Diocese of Orange and the skills and dedication of many talented, hardworking people along the way, the Hazel Wright organ will enjoy renewed life and a vibrant future. From her humble beginnings and struggles, she forever remains an icon of the musical world in an iconic cathedral made of glass.